Okay, we are live here. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be sitting. This webinar has been organized, it's a combined webinar organized by FujiLove magazine, and by Alien Skin Software, makers of the Exposure X3 editing software. My name is Tomasz. I'm the editor and founder of the FujiLove magazine. For those of you coming from other links and joining us here, we have the CEO of Alien Software with us, Alien Skin Software, Finlay. Ben Davidson is also with us here. He's from the marketing team of the Alien Skin Software. And our main guest here is Kevin Mullins. Kevin is a Fujifilm X photographer, official Fujifilm X photographer, user of Exposure X3. He has been using it for a couple of years, as far as I know. One of the most respected Fujifilm X photographers out there, documentary wedding photographer, and social, wedding and social photographer. Kevin has been using Exposure X3 for a while now. How long it has been, Kevin, that you have been using the application?
I remember it before it was the X. I've been using it for several years, really. So all the way through.
Yeah,
so.
Kevin knows the product very well, and the main purpose of this webinar today is to show you guys around in Exposure X3. Kevin knows the application pretty well, and we will be showing you around. Just quickly, as usual, on the right hand side, chat room, the chat window. You guys can be using we will be monitoring this chat window. You can be typing in your questions, all along as we are going and continuing with the webinar. For those of you who will stick to the end of the webinar, and we are planning on around 50-60 minutes here, guys from Alien Skin prepared a special offer, and we will have a special discount code, which we'll be announcing at the beginning of the Q&A session. I guess that's it. Finlay, would you like to add something? Say hello. You guys go ahead and introduce yourself. I think you'll do it the best. Huh?
Well, I just want to say, Tomasz, thank you very much for having us here, and Kevin, thank you for doing this presentation. We're excited to hear what you have to say.
Cool.
Yes, and thanks to everyone who is joining us.
Kevin, you ready to go?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Tell us all about it.
Okay, so this is an advertisement for different headphones, right? This is why we've all got different headphones. We all look like Teletubbies. Before I do the desktop sharing, like I said, I've been using Alien Skin Exposure. It's now an X3 version for several years, and I think probably the jump between X2 and X3 was when it really became a viable raw editing solution. I'm pretty sure most of the people who are watching today will be Fujifilm users, but of course you can use this with any camera. It doesn't really matter. But it's a fully functional raw editing software now. So what I'm going to go through today is the workflow that I do when I'm editing with Alien Skin Exposure. I'm going to show you how I cull weddings. I'm going to show you how I flag the images, how I use the collections to help me get through the edit. I'm going to show you how I do a black and white edit and a color edit, all of the other good stuff. So it's basically how I will go through a wedding from start to finish. And we'll get going. So in order to do this, I need to switch off my webcam and then share the desktop. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so you should, all things being well, and one of you guys shout in if you're not seeing it, you should see my Alien Skin Exposure interface right now. And like I said, the real good thing about Alien Skin Exposure X3 is that it's a fully functional RAW editor. You don't have to use RAW files, of course. You can apply the presets, etc., to JPEGs, but it actually stands itself as a very good application in terms of taking RAW files, Fujifilm RAF files, and whatever other camera you have. Now, the thing to note about Alien Skin Exposure, which is slightly different to maybe some of the other editing tools that you've used, is that it's not a catalog-based system. So you don't have to create a new catalog. You don't have to, you're not going to have all of the legacy files that go along with a catalog-based application such as Lightroom, and you can essentially just get up and run with it straight away. So the way that I typically do it is you can either, one of the things you could do right at the beginning is do a import from memory card. Now, it says here, copy photos from card. I'm not going to go through that process because I already have the images on the machine. It'll save us some time. But during that process, you can just bring them straight off the card. You can actually just drag them as well through the interface, or you can import them and put your keywords, etc. in there at that point. That's pretty straightforward and works very well. And you can import also from multiple cards. So if you've got a dual card reader, or some of the card readers I've got 4 memory slots, so you can import from multiple cards at any one time. Which is a pretty quick way of doing things. However, if you are actually of the mindset to bring images onto your desktop in some other way, either you drag them off onto the desktop, whether Windows or Macintosh yourself, or you use something like Photo Mechanic, then you'll end up with a folder such as this. And it's very, very simple. All you need to do is right-click, choose Open with Alien Skin Exposure, and that will actually just take us straight into the application with all of the raw files that you have in that folder. What you see here on the left-hand side, I'm just highlighting it, is the folder that I've just opened. So it's showing me all of the images in there. Now, technically they're called bookmarks. So you can, if you want to add another folder or bookmark, you can just go and select that on your desktop, and I would just add it to that list there. Underneath, you'll see collections. I'm going to talk about those a little bit more in a while. Now, collections, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think that is one of the new features of X3. So those of you using X2, you won't be able to use these collections as such, but they're really quite powerful, and I've kind of rolled them into the way that I do my editing pretty good. So as a RAW editor, before we get going, it's there's all kinds of chat on the internet about RAW editors and what's best and what's worse and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, I really can't tell the difference between many of them. There certainly isn't anything in Alien Skin Exposure that would make me not want to edit a raw file in it. So there's a lot of pixel peepers out there that will have opinions on various different RAW editors, but I run full editors through this, and it's good to go for me. It's perfectly good for that in that respect. So like I said, it's a non-catalog based application, so you're not going to get any kind of corruptions with the catalogs or anything like that. So what I'm going to go through with you is a typical workflow for the way that I do things. Now, this is just the way that I do things. It will hopefully give you an overview of the application in its entirety. But elements of this you can take away. Some of it you may do different ways. There's lots of ways of doing different things, or doing the same thing in different ways in this application. So I might give you some tips and hints, or you can follow the entire workflow and go for it that way. So I've brought the images in. I've explained that the folders are in there, or the folder's in there. It's a bookmark essentially. Now, what you're going to see here, like I said, is these collections. And the way that I kind of I've named them, by the way, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's because the collections are ordered alphabetically. So if I didn't have 1, 2, 3, and 4, then dancing and reception are going to be flipped around the wrong way. So I've just named them 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can create your own collection, call it whatever you want. So for example, maybe you wanted to do one for cutting the cake, which would be between 3 and 4. So I don't know, let's just say fireworks. I haven't got any fireworks pictures, but you get the idea. So you can just add another collection there. Now, the reason I have those is just to break up the editing process for me. So I can just very quickly highlight all of the images that are bridal prep. So that's all the way down to there. I'm just going to drag them into that collection. I'm then going to do the ceremony, which is pretty much all the way into here. We have that. Then almost everything else apart from the last few files will be reception stuff. And so this is the last wedding I shot a couple of weeks ago. So I haven't even seen half of these pictures yet. So reception, and then we have some purple dancing at the end. So I'll drag those over there. Now, what happens then is I can just actually click on any one of these and it's just broken them down for me. So it's just very easy for me. You know, the way that I typically do things is I'll edit a batch of images, and maybe I'll go and have a coffee or I'll go and do something else. It just gives me a target. And, you know, it's very easy to get sidetracked, and I'm kind of focused on just trying to get something done. I can just go through the bridal prep, just go through ceremony, go through reception, etc. So we know at this point where I have these images in place, I can crack on straight away. I could just start editing individually, or I can decide what I'm going to do in terms of presets. You know, there's all kinds of stuff you can do right the way at this point. But the thing I'm going to do first is I'm going to decide which images that I actually want to keep. Now, remember, as I said, it's not a catalog-based system. So one of the major downsides of something like Lightroom is that if you bring all of the images into Lightroom and then you do your selections, you've got all of those dead images that are just taking up time. It really kind of chugs on the disk space, etc. Now, because this is a file-based system, they're just sat on your drive, and if you're not using them, they're not doing anything. They're not clogging up. They're not affecting the speed of the application or anything like that. So I'm just going to very quickly have a look through these images and just going to select, or I'm actually going to reject them, I should say, the ones that I'm not going to keep. Now, you can, if I double click on this one image and bring it up, you can actually do it individually, so one image after the other, or you can actually choose these different amount of views. So if you decide to, if you've got a big enough screen, you might want to do 6 images, and you can decide which ones you're going to keep that way. I typically prefer to do single ones just because it brings it up a little bit bigger and I can just see them quickly. Now, there's quite a lot of keystrokes and buttons that kind of help me when I'm working with alien skin exposure. And if at any point you're struggling when you're using the application for keystrokes, you can always just go to the help menu and choose keyboard shortcuts. And that'll take you to a great little web page on their website, which does everything color coded and shows you exactly what you need to use. Now, what I'm actually going to do is use the minus key, which is basically flagging it as a reject. And if you use shift and minus at the same time, that will reject it and then move you automatically to the next image. So you don't have to use the mouse to kind of toggle across to the next one. So let's see, I'm just going to go through very randomly. Oops, let's go down to the image. And I'm going to reject that one. I'll keep that one. I'll keep both of those. Keep that. Keep that. Keep that. Reject that. Reject. So I'm just going to randomly go through these. I'm not actually going to make a final decision on which ones I'm keeping. I'm just doing it on the point of exercise here. So we have some nice stuff here. I'm just going to reject the ones that are looking pretty. There we go, kind of like that. Okay, so then I'll do the same thing for the ceremony images very quickly. Again, I'm just randomly doing this. So of course, I say I'm randomly doing it. I don't really want to show you any really bad images. These are all good. Let's get rid of some of these, otherwise it'll take too long. There we go. It's okay, but I'm going to keep it kind of like that with the little vicar doing his thing. These are okay. These are okay. So no, yes, no, no, yeah, keep that. Okay, so get rid of that. Then we have the veil lift. Get rid of those, and then we have all kinds of other stuff. This was the vicar said no pictures, so I stood at the back with my little silent shutter and my XT2 and flip down screen, and got the pictures that I needed. So we'll just go through some of these very quickly and just pop them out. And reception, again, there's a whole load here, so I'm just going to randomly do this stuff because otherwise we will be here way too long. So I'm just going to effectively deselect a whole load. Randomly select. It's very quick to do this as well. And nearly there. there. Oh, they also had, well, I don't know if you, wherever you are in the world, we have, occasionally we have these things called singing waiters, and they pretend to be drunk guests, and then they start singing, have all kinds of stuff, and they're always amazing, without exception, always amazing. And usually get told by the wedding planner or the bride or whoever's organised it, and all the guests kind of think, oh my word, what's going on there? Okay, so dancing, again, I'm just going to remove some of these. Actually, most of these look all right. So I'm just very quickly doing this stuff. Okay. So now essentially I've gone through and I've chosen which images I want to keep and which images I want to remove. Now down here you have this little icon, which I don't know what you'd call that, a toolbar, whatever it is, a wrench, and you can just choose to hide the rejects. So automatically, if I go back to the folder at the top, it's just going to show me the images that I've chosen to keep. So very quickly I've culled that. Of course, you take more care and attention for a full wedding. I'm doing it for the purpose of this exercise. And of course, at any one point, I can now just come in here and I can look at the ones that I've selected. Now, those rejected images will just be gone. You know, they're out of my mind. They're not clogging up the application. They're not doing anything. It's all, you know, it's all good to go. Now, what happens next is essentially, I mean, a lot of people come to alien skin exposure, I think, because they're attracted by the film presets. As I was way back when I first came to the application, it was because of the film presets or the film simulations, of which there are many, and some of them are brilliant, some of them are very retro, some of them are very funky. I think there's something for everybody there, and that's all down here in the bottom left-hand corner. We have something called presets. If I click on all, you'll see all of the different categories here. There's black and white films, there's low contrast, there's all kinds of good stuff in there. And what you'll notice with the presets there is it's actually showing the image that I've selected in the film strip. So it's giving me a little preview of it automatically there. Now, one of the things that Alien Skin have been really good at is embracing the Fujifilm community, and they actually, just as we, just as you have in Lightroom, they have what they call it, profiles, I think, in Lightroom. They also have created those for us in Alien Skin Exposure for the film simulations that you have in your Fujifilm cameras. So we have all of the standard Acros, classic chrome, Astia, all of those good things. And whilst it's true that those are never going to be exactly the same as the JPEG you would get out of the camera, they're very, very good likeness. So if I just bring this one up, and if I just show you very quickly, so we have Astia. Now, bear in mind, I've done no kind of exposure corrections to any of this or anything. So we have monochrome with the red filter. We have sepia, which I don't think many people in the Fujifilm cameras set that to switch it on. We have Velvia, which is a bit more vivid. So all of those things are good to go straight away, and you can just apply that either to one image or all of your images at any one point. Now, another quick keyboard shortcut, if you want to do a before and after at any point, no matter where you are in the application. So if I put one of the black and white ones on, I just press the backslash and it will show me the original image. And then as long as I hold that backslash down, then I will see the original image. And then when I take my finger off it, I will see the preset, the applied preset. And at any one point, you can also just click reset here down in the bottom right-hand corner. And that's just going to take you right back to the original raw file in its entirety. So, okay, so let's go back to the collection and let's just have a look at some of the options that we have in terms of other presets. There are all kinds of stuff in here. You have, well, you can work through them, and if you're in the application already, you've probably been through all of these already. There's all kinds of pretty wild and wonderful ones that if you want to get any creative and kind of for Instagram and stuff, these can be quite fun. However, one of the probably biggest benefits, I think, of something like Alien Skin Exposure is that when you do apply a film simulation, let's have a look at, I just want to find an extreme one, not one of mine. Let's go for this cross-processing again. I go for that blue. Now, one of the things, actually, that doesn't look too bad. One of the things you can do, though, is just drag down the overall intensity. So what you're doing essentially is just saying, yeah, I want this preset, but I actually don't want it as strong as it comes out. So it's very, very easy to just drag that down a little bit, and you've got so much control over this stuff. It really does allow you to kind of get into it and decide what you want in terms of the look and feel of your images. So just for the sake of that, I'm going to reset it and go back to my bridal prep. And I have all of my images here. Now, I'm going to talk about the filters down the bottom. So we have numbers and we have colors and we have various other things like that. Now, the way that I try and organize my workflow is that I like to select up front which images I'm going to send to black and white and which images I'm going to send to color. And the easiest way to do that for me is to essentially use the color tabs at the bottom. Now, it's quite difficult to explain this, but what you see here with the star rating, that's numbers 1 to 5. And actually the color ratings, not many people will know this, they are actually numbers as well. So red is 6, 7, 8, 9, and I think purple is the only one that doesn't actually have a number assigned to it. You can always reset any of these, but it means that in your mind you can use some of these letters and numbers and combinations of those, or colors and numbers, I should say, and combinations of those to help you with the workflow. So you might have to keep up with me a little bit as I explain this. Excuse me. Yeah. So essentially what I'm going to do is go through each of these sections, and I'm just going to I'm going to label them as red, and red means that they're going to go to black and white. So I'm just saying these are the ones that are going to be black and white, and the yellow ones are going to be color. And the easiest way to do that, like I said, is use numbers. So 6 and 7 we're looking at. So again, I'm just going to do it randomly for the sake of explanation. So 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 7, 7. I'll just do it randomly here. So we'll do 7 for those and 6 for those. And we'll go down to here and just to send those to red, and then those to and then dancing. I think we'll do all of these as color. So we will do all of those as color. So what that means now is if I go to the overall film strip, so I see all of my images now, I can actually, because I know that the ones that are going to be black and white are red, so I can just click on that and I can see that all of these are the ones I've chosen to be black and white, and I can work on those on my black and white presets. I can work on them in any way I want. I can switch off the red to see all of them. I can switch on yellow, and that's going to show all of the yellow presets, all of the ones that I want to go to color. So it's a very easy way of actually just kind of categorizing things and using those colors for your own kind of relevance. Now, one of the things that I also do is I will use the blue letter for blog posts. So when everything's done and dusted and everything is edited and the wedding's been delivered and it comes to blogging, I will just go right the way through all again and just mark the blue ones for blog, and then I can decide to export accordingly based on that stuff, because obviously I'm not going to export all of the images for the blog. But you get the idea, and you can use these for various different things. So I personally use them just for kind of allocating which one's going to be color and which one's going to be black and white. So on that point, let's go to the black and white ones. And I'm going to show you the black and white film simulation emulation that I prefer and that I've built, and show you how I've built that. And I'll do the same thing for color. And I think that, I've built two very different film simulations that are to my style, but my style isn't obviously the taste of everybody, but hopefully by stepping through it, you'll get an idea of the way to build these for you, or build the presets and allow you to kind of understand how they're done. So I'm just going to pick, let's go for this one, because it's got quite a good contrast, quite a good tone to it. Now, before you apply any film simulations or any presets, it's wise to do any kind of cropping or adjustments or white balance that you need to do. In this case, I'm just going to crop it slightly, just down there, I think. something like that. That's good. White balance is actually pretty good as it stands. However, you have your little white balance picker here, and you can just come and you'll see a preview in the actual screen itself. So if I white balance off their arm, it's probably a bit too cool. If I white balance off there, it's okay. But actually, it's all right as it stands. So that's pretty good to go. Now, in terms of presets, back down here, we will, if I go to all, you can search, by the way, there are, although we have the Fujifilm film simulations built in, there are, like I said, a load of other emulations, and you can just choose Fuji. You can search for Fuji and you'll get neopan, acros, low contrast ones, black and white misc effects, all of that kind of stuff. There's loads in there. However, if you decide to build your own preset, they will be in your user presets folder here, and I'll show you how to build one in a second. So we have this particular image that we decided to use. Now, let's just say that I'm going to use, let's just pick one of the Fujifilm, let's go for creamy high vignette. How about that one? So I'm just using this as a base for my preset, and it may well be that there are elements of this that I like and elements of this that I don't like, but I actually want to create a preset rather than replicating everything time after time. So let's just go down to the sections on the right hand side and decide what I want. Tone curve looks okay, all of that kind of stuff is fine. I'm going to, grain is fine, lens correction will be fine, there's not going to be any infrared stuff on there. Okay, so we want to do the vignette, that's where I'm looking for. I'm just going to make sure that we put something on there that I want, subtle black. Let's see if there's any overlays. Oops, there we go. I have all of that kind of good stuff down there. So borders and textures and all of that stuff. Now, if you want to make it stronger or harder, like I said, you can just adjust the overall intensity and drag it down a little bit. Now, at this point, it may be that this is the look you want. And so you come over to the presets panel on the left-hand side, click plus, and this is where you can create your own preset, and you can actually, decide what elements of the editing suite on the right hand side that you include. So you can create your own new category if you wish. I have a category already called KMP Film Simulations. It's taken the default because I haven't really changed anything, so it's taken the name of the one we've chosen. So I'm just going to call this KMP Highlights. I like to just put KMP in pretty much everything because it allows me to search for KMP, and then I just know that it's all my own stuff on there. Now, in the options down here, we have, I'll explain layers a little bit in a moment, but we're only using one layer at the moment. But if we were using multiple layers, we could choose which elements of it per layer we wanted to do. However, we've only got one layer, and the stuff that's underlined, basic overlays, focus, all of that kind of stuff, these are the things that have been affected in the editing panel on the right hand side. So all the ones that aren't underlined haven't actually been changed. So I'm just going to switch off all of those things that we don't need. That's good to go, and I'm just going to choose OK. And then if I go back over to my presets panel and we go up to the top, I'm just going to remove that search down here. We then have that one there called Highlights, KMP Highlights, which is the one we just created. So that can then be applied to anything. So if I go onto this one, I choose KMP Highlights. Boom. So that's the preset that we just created and we just built. So I'm just going to reset those though, because that's not the look that I want. And we'll keep on the same one. So these are red, remember? So these are the ones that are going to go to black and white. Now you'll see down the bottom, I have two that I've built already, KMP Mono and KMP Mono Warm. Now, both of these are based off the Codalith preset, which is built into the application. Now, Codalith, when I first discovered this, was like a revelation to me because I actually researched the film, and it's something to do with medical, medical scanning or something. It's very high contrast, although there is a low contrast version too. But I use that as the base for my own black and white film simulation in alien skin exposure, and I think it looks beautiful. So when I just apply that one, straight away the tones, the contrast, everything about that is pretty much done. There's not a lot that I need to do to that image, but you can obviously do anything that you need to do in terms of shadows, highlights. Your exposure will have been adjusted accordingly beforehand, so remember that if you need to do any kind of exposure correction. Now, all that's happening down here in terms of the codediff preset is pretty much the default stuff. However, what we do have is the ability to adjust things like I'm just going to close the overlays down. Oh, and by the way, one of the other quick things that you can do is if you find in all of the stuff on the right-hand side, or indeed on the left-hand side, kind of overbearing, you can just right-click and choose solo mode. And solo mode will close everything bar the panel you're working in, which I find really useful because I'm always kind of going through everything and looking for the stuff that I need. So in the tone curve, when that loads up, you'll see that I've actually given it quite a big contrasty tone curve. And, you know, that's, like I say, that's the look that I like also. And you can create your own tone curves. You can, I'll talk to you a little bit more about tone curves when we do the color stuff because it's more relevant. The split toning, all of that kind of stuff can be done in this panel here. The vignettes we have as, you know, the standard stuff you can apply. I normally go for subtle black if I need to. I don't include it in my standard black and white profile because not all of the images it will suit, and I'll typically go through in batch at the end and just apply the vignette that I need to apply at any point. For grain, you'll see that I've selected the regular grain 25%. Now, hands down, the best grain and kind of noise emulation software that I've ever used is Alien Skin Exposure. Like it's along with the presets and the way that it handles grain and noise is you know, the reason why I use it and why I've always used it in the first place. Is, you know, it's really powerful. You have all of these presets that are in there already. I typically start with regular grain 25% because that just gives me the look I want. But you have all of the other good stuff as well. Super fat grain, for example, if you really want to go film it, a contrast if when it looks like it's being pushed, then you have all of these options here. Now, I would normally do something like half of that. So I'm just dragging down the overall grain strength. So I don't want it to be too much. I want it to be around about 12, something like that. I'm adding to it. So I'll just leave it about there. I'll just type into the box 12. It's probably the easiest way to do it. And much like all of these things, you can actually create your own presets also. So let's just say you're happy with that strength, but you know, perhaps you want to, let's just say you want more grain in the shadow area. So just drag that up and you can actually save that as a preset, create a new category. I would call it something like KMP grain, and we'll call it KMP 25 mono, because the grain that I would apply to mono and color might be slightly different. So I can click OK to that. Now I have this always to use KMP grain, and I can add as many of those as I want, obviously. And once you apply that and then you save it as a preset, then that will automatically be applied as well as a film preset. So you're in a good situation to be able to build up the look and feel that you really want for all of the images. And it's very, you know, I find when I'm building the images or when I'm building the look in the first place, it can take a little bit of time because you're trying to find something that looks good across multiple different density of images. And you're never going to build a preset that's going to just make all your images sing straight away. You will have to adjust some of them, all of them in a small way at least. But it's going to give you the point where you get to start things very quickly. And, you know, I really kind of rely on these presets entirely, really, to make this working for me, to make this a very quick workflow. I also have, I'm just going to reset that. I also have the warm one, which is basically exactly the same, but I have a split tone applied to it. Okay, and I've just gone for subtle warmth down there. And you'll see here I have it as a custom preset, as I said earlier. So I've created this preset, split toning preset, and that really, you may not be able to see it on your screen. I'm not sure whether you can see it or not. But if I make this extreme, just so you can see the difference, then you should be able to kind of, just going to drag that down and make this really crazy. So that should be shown a little bit more now. So I'm not sure if because it's so subtle, I'm not sure if it's actually coming up on your screens or not. So I'm just going to reset that whole image and apply that again from the that preset. So, you know, it's beautiful black and white. I was very happy with that. You may want to, at this point, when you're doing the black and white stuff, at least to go back and decide on, if you need to kind of recover some shadows, or you need to bring down the exposure or contrast, clarity, all of that good stuff can be applied at this point as well. Okay, so I'm just going to reset that, and I'm going to go back up to the whole set. I'm going to remember they're colored red, so I know that these are all going to be black and white. Now let's just work on the assumption that I've done my exposure correction and straightening and white balance and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to highlight all of them, and then I'm going to go for my mono warm, and boom, there we go. So they're all done very, very simply, very quickly. And if I go into any given one and look at it, it's going to give me, it's good to go. I can't help myself but to kind of crop that a little bit out. But the time and effort involved in doing that is pretty quick. It's a no-brainer really for me to do it that way. Okay, so let's go. We've done these are going to black and white, remember. So at this point, in terms of workflow, I would now go through all of these and just make sure the shadows, the highlights, any exposure, crop in, all of that kind of stuff is done. And then when they're done, I will mark them as number 1, which means that they're done. So remember, an image can be marked as a number and a color. So let's just assume that these are all finished. I'm going to highlight all of them, and then I'm going to set the rating to, which is down here. So now what that means is that when I'm, when I kind of come back to my computer, I can actually think to myself, yeah, okay, all the ones marked as 1 are done, completed. I don't need to do any more work on them. It may well be that I get halfway through the edit and, I kind of need to go home, or I'm going to go for a cup of coffee or something. So I then know that the ones that are marked as red but aren't 1 are still the ones that need working on. They still need to be done. The ones that are red and 1 are finished, and they're black and white, and that's the end of those kind of images. So let's talk about color. Go back to the, let's take off the filters. We'll go to the color images. So those are yellow. So color is obviously a very different beast, and again, there's lots of film simulations built into the application, but I like a very filmic one specifically that I've built. Now let's pick a image. Let's go for one that has nice tones in it again, so we can see it fully. Let's go for this. This is the Singing Waiters, by the way. We won't use that one, but let's go for this one actually, because this is a nice. It's got a lot of shadow and highlight. Now this image, by the way, is bridal prep. I like to always. I don't know about in America or wherever you are in the world, but the brides over here, they always move their engagement ring onto their left finger before they go and get onto their usually onto their left finger when they're going to get married, so they can kind of have the wedding ring around it. So I always try and snap an image of the wedding ring or the engagement ring on their hands as we're kind of having bridal prep. Okay, so I have my film simulations here. That highlights one. We have the mono ones, of course, but we're going to go for the color one, which when I hover over it, you'll see it's really, really dark. It's going to be dark because there's a lot of shadow, and that's why I kind of picked this one to show us how we can recover from it. Now, on the right-hand side, I've made a lot of changes to this, a lot of changes to the actual editing panel on the right-hand side. So I have highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, all of that kind of stuff is changed. Now, initially, I'm going to be bringing up things like the exposure. I'm going to bring up a little bit more shadows. You can also, if you wish, by the way, to use the brush on the right hand side there. You've got the brush, and you can use gradients. So if I want to just gradient across on the left hand side, I can use one of these gradients, and again you can add that to a new layer. So I want to add a layer at the top and apply my gradient, then I can just do it on there, which means I can switch the layer on and off if I don't wish to do that. Now, I'm going to go down and show you what else. Let's just close this panel out. And we have, I'm going to reset it again and go back in here so I don't have to worry about all the stuff that I've done. I'm just going to drag the exposure up. I'm going to increase the shadows. So these are the values. Now, again, obviously, it's very, like I say, it's to taste. I like a filmic, warm-looking image. So all of these values are kind of how I've built that. You can kind of pause this on replay, I think, and look at those values if you so wish. Detail sharpening, I typically go for 25 on the amount. It does depend a little bit on where the image is going. And when we do the export stuff at the end, I'll show you, I'll explain to you how I do kind of export sharpening. I don't really sharpen inside the application. Very, very rarely do I sharpen inside the application. But of course, you can again do that to taste. If you're a landscape photographer, for example, you might want to take a little bit more note of the sharpening stuff. But typically for wedding stuff, I don't need to. Now, in color, we have all kinds of stuff going on down here. So you'll see that I have in the HSL panel, hue, saturation, and luminance, all of these values, well, majority of these values have been changed. So I've built up a color profile, if you like, that's going to give me the image that I want, or part of the image that I want. Now, again, as with the other drop downs, you can create your own presets for this stuff. So if you get to one that works for you and you want to create a preset, then you can do that. You can create some for black and white, or not for black and white, but you can create some for very vibrant images, create some for very muted images. So these are the values that I like to use. And again, I'm not going to go through all of the numbers, but if you want to do it on kind of playback and pause, then you could do that. Now, the next thing, and probably the most relevant thing, I guess, to this particular color image is the tone curve. Now, typically, people will use tone curve just to add shadows and highlights, which is fine. But you'll see here we also have the channel option here. So on standard RGB, I've got some contrast shadows, midtones, highlight values selected. But the crucial stuff is in the RGB values channels themselves. So RGB here. Now, each of those have had their own control points added. So when you just click on the line, you'll add a control point to it, and each of them have different values. So again, I'm just going to go through them quickly. If you need to jot them down, fine, or you can pause and on playback. So around about 15 and 3 on the output, 31, 16, 71, 81, and then that's right at the top for red. Green is around about 14 and 4, 30 and 18, there or thereabouts, 50 and 50, and we have 71 and 80, and we have 85 and 90, 90-ish. And blue, we have 15 to 30, 18 or 19, 48, 46, and then 71, 80, and 86 and 92. So again, now because I don't want to be doing that all the time, I've created a film set, a preset for that, and you'll see that I've got tone curves that apply for color and tone curves that apply for monochrome also. So when you build these in, it's very time consuming to get the look that you want. So being able to use these presets are like legendary good at being able to speed things up for you. It's gonna save you a lot of time and effort. Okay, so I'm just going to close that down. What else do we have? We had the vignette. Subtle black as usual, as we did previously. There's no overlay stuff. There's no focus stuff. Grain. If I bring that up, a regular grain 25, and again, it's around about 11, 12, just to kind of soften it a little bit. No infrared, no bokeh, however you pronounce it. Now, some of you, especially the portrait guys, will probably really like the bokeh features in the application. It's actually really very clever. It's just not something I would ever use for wedding work. I don't really do portrait stuff, so it's not something that I've kind of got involved with. And then things like lens correction, which is where it's going to tell you what profile the lens is in. So in this case, it's picked up that it's a 56mm lens, and it's going to take any kind of profile correction from that in terms of distortions and what have you. So in terms of that image, I mean, I would still need to work a little bit on it. I might kind of bring the temperature down slightly and still bring the exposure up a bit more, something like that. But it's good, I'm happy with that, and it's very, very quick to get there to do that. So if I just go back to all of them, and remember we're looking at the yellow images, so I'm just going to apply, and I'm going to put my color film on there. And there it goes. So they're all done. I can already see which ones will need correcting and, lightening up, etc. Now, if we go to something like this image, which clearly has got when the band comes along and they're like, yeah, we've got really pink lights. And you're, as a photographer, you're like, great, Wonderful. Thank you very much. So this obviously needs white balance correction. So I'm going to click my little picker. I'm going to find a point where it's pretty good. Yeah, it's okay. That's not too bad. I might crop it down a little bit, just straighten it up a little bit. I'm going to drag the exposure up a little bit more as well. And something like that. Now, and that's good. Now, if I hold down the backslash key, we've gone from that to that in like one click of a button. So it's it's really, really wonderful in terms of how much time it saves you. Now, of course, as all good applications should do, you've also got the brush, as I just mentioned. And if you want to do something like I don't know, dodging. I don't know, you've got all kind of portrait stuff here as well, but if I want to kind of dodge any part of the image, I could just use that preset. I can go down to the basic panel here, increase the exposure perhaps to a bit more, and let's close that down, and then I can just brush it on. Now I've got a mouse with a scroll wheel, so I can just use the scroll to decide what I want to brush this onto. And you can control it in terms of the exposure as much as you want, highlight, shadows, everything else. Now, when you show the mask, you will you can see it's gone dark a little bit, but that's the redness of the mask being shown. It's probably not a very good example actually, but you can want to switch it off; it'll take us back. And one of the things that actually, it's like I said earlier, it's really neat to be able to use these different layers, because at any point I can then just switch the layer on or off and decide whether it's working or not. And that's a really good useful feature that I use quite regularly when I'm doing any kind of retouching of images, especially the later on in the day where it's really tough and the lighting is really difficult. So let's just have a quick look at this particular image. So again, this image is it's got the preset applied. If I hold down the shift key, that's the raw out of the camera. So I'll need to come in here and find a white balance that works. There we go. And already I kind of like that. It's kind of my style. Might just do something with the shadows on the right-hand side. And then, it's 1250 ISO. So, it's looking pretty good in terms of the raw conversion. Now, by the way, this kind of information that you see up here on the top left-hand side of the image, all of this is customizable in the preferences. So if we go to edit preferences, we have all of these options. So in terms of preview, I can choose what to show up here, the file name, capture time, f-stop, all of that stuff. I typically have the exposure, f-stop, ISO, lens. I don't need to worry about all the other stuff, or all that kind of thing. You also have the option to configure all of the panels and decide which ones are top left, which ones are right. Some of you may not want some of the stuff on the right hand side to be there. You can move it around, etc. So that's all good to go. Now, what else do I need to show you? We have once everything's done, that will be marked as 1 also. So the colors in black and whites, they're all kind of completed. Now, if I show you pretty much everything. Now, remember, I didn't do any image correction to any of these because we just don't have any time for that. But you can see straight away how quickly that process was. So, for example, this one here, I know it's too bright. I'll need to work on that. I could which ones are too dark, which are all right, and definitely the color ones at the end, they need white balance adjusting. But it's such a quick workflow. It's really, really, really cool way of doing things. Now, by the way, if there are some images that you're not quite sure whether you like the film look of it, or whether you kind of you want to try both black and white, both monochrome, you can use if you look to this little icon at the top with the little spotlight, you've got the audition. So you can click on that and you can drop 6 different presets, or up to 6 different presets in here. So let's just go for some random stuff down here. Boom, 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 boom. And decide which one you want, and then you can just either apply or discard whichever ones you're interested in. So you can look at all of these different images with different film simulations at any one point. So you could choose which ones you want there. The other thing you can do as well, if you decide actually you're going to deliver images to your clients in both black and white and color, which a lot of people do. In fact, I do that sometimes too. You could just create virtual copies. So when you right click, you'll see create virtual copy there. And all that does is create a reference copy. So it's not duplicating the file on the disk. It's creating a virtual copy, and it's going to allow you to have a black and white and a color version, or two different color versions if you want. Then once everything is done, we've kind of done our edit. That was a very quick wedding edit. We can then do the exporting. So you've got an export option, which will bring up the standard export dialog. You've got quick export, which you can do things like set up your own export presets as usual. So you can see here that I've got one set up for KMP high-res finals, which means that it's going to use the export destination preset that I've set up for high-res finals, which is actually going to be in the same raw folder. It'll create a folder called high-res finals. I have one for Facebook and I have one for Instagram. So it allows me to create different export profiles for different applications. So let me just show you as I would do that. Let's just pick, we'll pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images. We'll do file, quick high-res finals. Comes out, I'll pop over to the raw application here. And when those folders have been created, we should see them appear in here at some point. There we go. So high-res finals, and there they come, the JPEGs. And you can choose to the size and the sharpening and all that kind of stuff at the end there. When they are done, I can do the same then for Facebook and everything else that is applicable. So. Excuse me again. That was a very fast overview of, excuse me, alien skin exposure. Excuse me, sorry. It's this heat. It's like 100 degrees still here. It's, I don't know, nearly 11 o'clock at night now. A full wedding, well, not a full wedding, but most of a wedding. Edited color, black and white selections, importing, the flagging, the rejecting of the images. I don't know. We did that in half an hour or so. You know, I can honestly say, kind of hand on heart, it takes usually less than a couple of hours to do a full wedding in alien skin exposure. It's very quick. You need to be happy with your own presets, and you know, you will obviously need to retouch some of the images in terms of exposures, but the actual process and the way it works and the interface is great, very intuitional and fun to use, which is key. So I think if that's all right with you guys, I think that I should put the webcam back on. Finley, Ben, does that sound about right? Thomas?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. Such a great presentation. I can only, you know, confirm what Kevin was talking about. I switched to exposure out, I think it's a year ago right now, where I completely switched, you know, my workflow from Lightroom to exposure. And I can only confirm. I mean, I love the fact how quick the application, you know, was running from the very beginning on my machine. Now I switched to, you know, I have a new computer right now, but back then my Mac was not even, you know, the newest and the most powerful one. It was just so quick to work in, and I love the fact, for example, that you don't have to switch between, you know, the library and the develop module. It's all in front of you at all times. So there's a couple of really great things, and the presets, you know, combined with the presets with the there is this whole kind of, you know, photographic darkroom feeling to this application. It was some, you know, this combination of the user interface, of the presets, of the speed of it, and the very important for me, I love the fact you don't have this huge catalog file, and it's so easy, you know, to take a folder of images of your choice, and let's say when I'm, you know, running on a trip, you know, going somewhere abroad, I just need, you know, those 2 folders of images which I want to continue working on. I take those 2 folders, copy to another drive, run exposure on a completely different computer, and I just have all my edits with me, you know, together with my files. So
yeah. That's one of the things I forgot to mention, was that you can in the preferences you can store the settings and everything on Dropbox or any kind of cloud server, so it syncs directly with my laptop also. So when I'm away, it syncs that. And the other thing that I just kind of run out of time is, and I don't print generally. I do send off to labs to print, but you also have full printing suite now, so you can actually print out directly from the application. Yeah, that's it. I think this is the feature from that came in the latest release, right? Printing, right, Ben?
I already tested it. Works beautifully. I made some beautiful prints straight out of exposure, so I can confirm it's working. I was using my Epson here, and wonderful prints. Many of you asking about the discount code already, so let me paste a special FujiLove, discount code for exposure for those of you who attended the webinar today. You should be seeing it in a second at the top of the chat window. And I would say, Kevin, you have 10-15 minutes for us?
Yeah.
To go into some Q&A. So guys, now would be the time. You have the coupon code at the top of the chat window. Shoot some questions. There is probably many questions you may have. Ben, Kevin, Finley, we are all here. And I have a few already. Let me start with those which I collected. So Kevin, Yanis was asking, so if it's not a catalog system, I kind of touched on this right now, right? But so how do you save your edits like in Lightroom? Do you have to export every image then?
No, it's kept in the Alien Skin folder. So it's like sidecar files of some kind. Ben will probably be able to answer that more technically, but yeah, you don't need to. There's no kind of writing of the files separately. There's no kind of there's no save. There's no. I remember when I very first got Alien Skin Exposure, like way back when, I was like, "Where's the save option?" And there isn't one. You don't need it. It's just pointing to your references on your drive. You just don't need it. It's good to go.
That's correct.
That's not a very technical answer.
It's a non-destructive editor, and like Kevin said, the edits are saved in very small sidecar files, so your RAW file is not touched. And when you want to have the image with your complete edits done, you simply export it as a TIFF or a PSD or a JPEG.
Some people were asking about, and I think Ben, you were answering in the chat room before, were asking about the, Lightroom has something called Smart Collections, and as I understand, you guys are working on it, right, for the next release? Smart Collections. Or Finley, you can maybe jump in here.
We are working on Smart Collections. That is correct.
Yeah, no official announcement yet, but
I can't say more than that.
One of the things you can currently do is in the search, in the metadata box at the bottom, you can search metadata. So for example, you could type in something like ISO 200 and it will show you all of the images that have ISO 200. What you can't do is something like ISO 200 or less than 5,000, for example, which may be something that comes in the future, I don't know. But so you can search through the metadata, and there's kind of hopefully things come in the future that might kind of.
That is correct. There's a lot of metadata capability, keywords, and all manner of other types of metadata. So it's very flexible as far as how you organize and search your collection.
Yeah.
Kevin, have you played with the the healing or the cloning tool on the healing brush? What is it called? The spot healing tools.
Yeah, it works really well. Again, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound like weird, but I typically don't do any kind of retouching in that respect. I don't remove bins and things like that. I'll try not to cover them in the first place when I shoot. But for things like, I was testing it out the other day for my daughter had taken some images and I brought them into Alien Skin Exposure. She had to do a school project. So we had to get rid of some stuff in the background because our kitchen looked like a mess. So yeah, we just kind of moved some cups and things like that off the side, and it clones really well. Yeah, just works. Yeah.
We've integrated retouching tools with our layering system. So for folks who may shoot portraits, there's some presets you can use that actually have layers for like iris enhancement, skin smoothing, and such. And there are different types of healing brushes for, say, blemishes versus landscape, like cloning or removing objects.
Joe is asking if you want to edit in Photoshop from exposure. When you save the, when you edit the file in Photoshop, jump over to Photoshop and then save it. does it create another version in Exposure like Lightroom, or edit the original file?
It's a TIFF. Yeah, so the behavior would be like Lightroom. So for example, if you're coming from Exposure to Photoshop, you'll be flattening your image, so you'll want to make sure if you've got a bunch of layers that you're prepared to do that.
You can. I think you can choose to do it as a PSD as well, right? I think. When you
I think so. Finley, is that correct?
I think in the export options, you can choose PSD, TIFF, or JPEG. I think
that is correct.
Someone is asking about, in Lightroom you have something called dehaze. It's something they recently, I think, introduced. Do you guys also, thinking about introducing something similar? I actually, to be honest, myself, I don't know exactly what the dehaze slider is doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do not have the dehaze slider yet. It's something that we've looked at but haven't implemented yet.
Let's see. Questions coming in. It's mainly about, features that are still, probably guys, you're working on them.
I see a few questions about the webinar itself. We're recording it and we will make it available.
Yeah, absolutely. So those of you who registered for this webinar, you will automatically receive a link, to a replay, so you can watch it, quietly. Like Kevin was saying, we can pause it, look at the settings and so on. And we'll be also, I think, reposting a replay of this webinar on a few different platforms as well.
We also have a very extensive tutorial video library on our site. I definitely encourage folks to visit that and to start with the getting started videos.
Yeah, they're great. There's a lot of good stuff on there.
There is one question. I think maybe you, Ben, could try answering this one, because it's an important one. Many people asking this question. So when I'm moving, my entire workflow from Lightroom, let's say, to alien skin, to Exposure, what would be the best way to go around it? In terms of, is there a way of moving your edits or from Lightroom over to alien skin?
There is. So we have, what I would direct folks to is our support site, and we have an article about that very process. I can even provide that link in the chat window for folks if they'd like. I'll go ahead and do that right now.
Is there a possibility of rotating the image in Exposure? Like 90 degrees or?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's crop and rotate.
Crop and rotate, yeah. Cropping, of course. Yeah. I mean,
free cropping or at various I don't know what the dimensions or parameters.
Mm-hmm. Sharpening and focus options. Kevin, maybe would you have some generic setting suggestions when it comes to sharpening slider?
Well, I mean, I touched on it. I typically go for 25:1 on the settings. Now, sharpening is one of those things that, if you're in the Fujifilm world, it's like the third word you hear all day long, sharpening. And the fact is, and this is the gospel truth, I just don't sharpen any of the images, like the raw files. JPEGs I would never sharpen because they're done in the camera. Pretty much I'll take the defaults. In Alien Skin Exposure, it's got great sharpening tools. But, I find that 25 with the 1 as the radius is like good to go. Then when I do the export, you have an option there for output sharpening, and you can choose for matte paper, for gloss paper, etc. And I would just choose wherever it's going. If I'm sending it to my album lab, then I'll choose matte because they go into a matte album. And I work on the assumption that the clever people who are programming the application and the fairies inside the computer know far more about sharpening than I do. And I'm not printing myself. I'm not, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but it's, for me, I think it's just, I don't know, how close am I going to look at the images? And, I don't worry about it, basically. I don't worry about it.
Some of you are asking if there's a free trial available. Yes, as far as I know, it's still the same, right? 30 days Yep. Free trial available. Correct. On the website.
It's a fully featured 30-day trial. So you get everything new, all the features, not dumbed down in any way.
Yeah. So make sure you go ahead, download, the software, play with it, and then write down the coupon code. Once you get convinced, I'm pretty sure you like it. And yeah, I guess, guys, what do you think? Should we call it a day?
I will actually. The question about sharpening, we on our tutorials page, we have a dedicated tutorial video about sharpening techniques. So for the folks who are interested in that, I would encourage them to watch that.
Great. Kevin, thank you so much. It was a great hour. You feel like a fish in water. It seems like you're swimming in exposure. It felt quicker than the software actually is.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the great thing about it. It's it's really cool. It's really quick. Even though I have my computer is plugged into somebody else's electricity at the moment, but it still worked really well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. We appreciate it. I think all of us your time. It's late here at your place. Here's even later, but still, UK is 1 hour behind.
Still hot.
Ben Finley, thank you so much also for being here. Any last words of wisdom, Finley, you would like to share with our audience?
No more words of wisdom. Just I want to say thanks to everybody who took the time to attend and watch the presentation. Thanks to you, Tomasz, for hosting, and thanks to Kevin for presenting. That was really very interesting and informative.
No worries. Thank
I
you
would
for
also
inviting me.
I would also encourage folks to keep an eye out on our blog. We've got exciting news that tends to come up.
Take care, everyone. Have a great evening. Have a great afternoon. Thanks so much for being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you.